Hi, I'm Fan, and today we're going to talk about the newest SEGA Ages releases on Switch and determine if they're worth grabbing. I'm going to break tradition a bit here. Generally in these videos I cover the games in the order they're released, but this time I'm going to talk about Sonic 2 up front because I'm sure it's what most of you are here for. Plus, sorry Puyo Puyo 2 fans, but I'm as garbage at the game as the garbage within the game, but I'll do my best. So, Sonic 2. What can really be said about it that's never been said before? Well, for starters, Sonic 2 didn't show up to my graduation ceremony. That's a bit of a bummer. But on a lighter note, this release of Sonic 2 is Sonic 2, which means that it's one of the most iconic video games ever made, with tons of levels to master, Chaos Emeralds to collect, great music to bop your head to, and all around a great way to celebrate Sonic with the movie's recent theatrical success. It's just one of those games that you've most likely played one way or another. If you somehow haven't, you can pull out your smartphone right now and try it for free, and then decide if you'd like to then spend $8 on this version. So that begs the question, what makes this release stand out from the other releases? All in all, it's largely the same things that were added to the Switch version of Sonic 1, so if you enjoyed that release, you know what you're getting into here. The biggest addition to standard play is the retrofitting of Sonic Mania's drop dash move into this game. Like I said back in my video about Sonic 1, this is a blessing because ever since Mania came out, I just instinctively use the drop dash. I just love using it, and playing the original Sonic games without it just feels wrong to me. If you're unaware, the drop dash is basically a less powerful spin dash you can charge up while jumping by holding down the action button. It's a great risk-reward mechanic that helps you build speed in tricky spots, but punishes you by relying on it too much and zipping into obstacles. But if you want to keep using the drop dash because it's so enjoyable, the Ring Keep mode will help you out. With Ring Keep mode on, you start the play session with 10 rings right away, and anytime you get hit, you only lose half of the rings you're holding instead of all of them. There's also an optional graphic overlay at the bottom that shows your current chain of rings collected, and the highest amount of rings you've collected without taking a hit in that session of the game. While these are things the release of Sonic 1 sported, this version of Sonic 2 also boasts a few other things to its name. One such thing is a better implementation of HD Rumble. It's an odd thing to convey through video, but just about everything gives some kind of feedback to the Joy-Cons. In particular, spin dashing and drop dashing sends a weirdly satisfying vibration through to your hands. I feel like HD Rumble is secretly one of those things some people really don't like though, so you can turn it off entirely if you are so inclined. The other big feature is Super Sonic mode, which you can enable after beating the game in original or Ring Keep mode. It's pretty simple. You start a new game with all 7 Chaos Emeralds right from the get-go, so that immediately you can collect your 50 rings and become Super Sonic. It's a nice inclusion, one that will certainly see some use from me. Getting into some smaller additions here, there are online rankings, CRT filters, save states, the ability to turn stage select on without needing to input the cheat code, and the choice of the international version of Sonic 2 or the Japanese release. These are rather standard features for the Ages lineup, but I just wanted to make sure I took the time to note them. From here, I'll segue back out into a few larger features before giving my verdict on this release. A few SEGA Ages releases have had these short challenge modes, and Sonic 2 joins that lineup. In this one, the challenge is to play through Emerald Hill Zone collecting 100 rings as quickly as possible, and then reaching the goal without losing them. This challenge is actually a bit tricky, as some of the badniks in Emerald Hill are just jerks, so I found some enjoyment in it. And finally, as you've probably noticed from the footage, Knuckles is playable. Both him and Sonic can attempt this challenge, which leads to the largest inclusion of this release, Knuckles in Sonic 2. It's basically just how it was with the actual lock-on functionality the Sonic and Knuckles cart provided, letting you explore Sonic 2 and see where Knuckles' climbing ability lets you go. As a hardcore Sonic fan, I can't say it's the most exciting inclusion, but it's absolutely a respectable one that offers a unique flavor to a classic game. Though I may be a bit disappointed since at some point, M2, the developers of this particular release, indicated that they'd be looking to restore some cut content to Sonic 2 as one of the features in this release. To my knowledge, that fell through. M2 usually give everything their all, so I have no doubt that they did their best to fulfill that statement. But as that hardcore Sonic fan, it got my imagination running on what they could possibly have intended. But alas, what we have here is a solid release of Sonic 2. What you see is what you get. Outside of the Drop Dash edition, there won't be much here to excite Sonic fans who have played the game inside and out, but at the end of the day, it's Sonic 2, and slowly getting more of the Sonic series accessible on the Switch is a net positive overall. I'm personally more of a Sonic 3 guy myself, but we're unlikely to get that release, so this is the next best thing. Unless you're just sick of Sonic 2, it's certainly worth a purchase in my humble opinion. And now with Puyo Puyo 2, I go out of my depth into scary, uncharted territory. When Puyo Puyo SEGA Ages releases, I brought on my buddy Tracker to talk about the game as he's more experienced with the series than I am, but this time I wanted to brave these depths myself and attempt to talk about this release. If you're primarily a Sonic fan who has stuck around in this video, you largely know Puyo Puyo as Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine, or you know that Sonic Team has had a hand in a few Puyo Puyo releases. According to the press release I got from SEGA about this game, Puyo Puyo 2 is one of the biggest arcade games ever released in Japan. And according to that same press release, this entry introduced an improved rule set, as well as the ability to offset incoming garbage from opponents by flinging garbage of your own. But let's back up for a second in case that doesn't make sense to you. Puyo Puyo is a puzzle game where by placing 4 colors of these gelatinous beings called Puyo together, they dissipate, give you points, and send some garbage pieces to your opponent's board to clog up their play area and disrupt their strategy. That strategy comes from thinking several steps ahead and thoughtfully setting up combos. You won't get far in this game by making simple one-combo chains. You'll need to set up your field in such a way that each dissipation drops Puyo into a place that will cause a domino effect. The better your combo, the more garbage gets put into the opposition's play area. If any gets into your own, it will disappear with adjacent Puyo combos. All of this results in a pretty frantic and intensive game. One that, quite frankly, I'm awful at. But with the difficulty options in this release, even I was able to set up some gnarly chains and do even better in this release than I did with the first Puyo Puyo. I'm not good, but I'm proud of how well I've managed to do in this game. I was on the easiest difficulty, but let me have my small victory, please. As for its features, it does have an online battle mode, which I haven't been able to test. I just can't seem to find anyone online, no matter when I try to play for these videos. It also features online rankings, and some of the replays here are just remarkable. This execution here in particular just had me thinking,
what is life? Why are we here? Have I accomplished anything in life that required as much thought and effort as this? No, I haven't.
This release has some great accessibility features, and I'm really jazzed about them. There is a colorblind mode. Now this is one I can't speak to myself, but if anyone in the comments happens to benefit from this, I'd love to hear just how effective the implementation is. I sometimes hear that colorblind modes in certain games aren't great, but other times other games absolutely nail them. On top of that, you can just pretty much set the Puyo forms any which way you like. But my favorite thing here is a rewind feature that is potentially the most involved one I've seen for any retro release yet. Instead of just rewinding as long as you've held the button, you can go back play by play to study how the match evolved, which Puyo were sent in which order, and to better experiment and strategize. This rewind feature seems immensely beneficial, both for complete beginners like me to go back and try a new angle, and for more intermediate players to get a better grasp on how the game doles things out. It's just great and has actually motivated me to play the game a lot more. Will I do it? We'll see, but for now I've been enjoying it. If you don't want to worry about this, of course, there is a toggle for it before getting into the game. This version of Puyo Puyo 2 also includes some options for things like margin time, alt rules, etc., which, probably means more for hardcore Puyo Puyo fans, but I imagine hardcore Puyo Puyo fans have already bought the game and probably aren't watching this video. As a newcomer, I've been perfectly fine with the defaults here. As far as the modes go, there's the arcade version, of course, and an endurance mode where you fight each of the opponents in a sequential order. And lastly, there's a versus mode which lets you play against another player locally. I don't know anyone nearby who would play this with me, but there are a few game options there, so if you happen to know a fellow Puyo Puyo player, I'm sure this, combined with the portability of the Switch, makes this very attractive. On top of it all, this seems to be the first time the arcade version has ever officially been released in English territories. From what I can gather, this is a fan favorite entry, so I'm glad this finally got here. So Puyo Puyo 2 is a pretty attractive release if you're open to the idea of this kind of game. But if you've had a negative brush-in with the series before, or just know that you don't like Puyo Puyo, you may be safe skipping this one. I personally am enjoying it in spite of not really understanding it, but I'm also in the unique position of someone who has been trying to really click with this series for years now. If you don't fall into those camps, I'd easily recommend this release if you're not going to opt for Puyo Puyo Tetris or Puyo Puyo Champions. This release is the cheapest option of the three, and frankly Puyo Puyo 2 seems to invalidate the first Puyo Puyo 2 seems to invalidate the first Puyo Puyo release in the SEGA Ages lineup. It's there for hardcore fans and for those who want to see the iteration, but for everyone else, this is your jumping in point. As for whether I'd recommend this release for existing fans, well, I'm sure they've already bought it, considering this is basically the first time it's ever been released outside of Japan. So, there's 2 more SEGA Ages releases in the bag for this very 2-y episode of my SEGA Ages Switch review series. These are 2 pretty solid releases, and while I wish this iteration of Sonic 2 was more exciting, I understand why it isn't. What did you think? Will you be picking up either of these releases? On top of it all, there are only 3 more SEGA Ages releases left. Which ones are you hoping will get announced past those? In the meantime, I've covered every other SEGA Ages release thus far on my channel. I'd recommend subscribing so you don't miss future reviews, and then checking out my video on Virtual Racer and the first Puyo Puyo so that you can see one of the coolest releases in the lineup and to hear someone more knowledgeable about the Puyo Puyo series talk about it. That link will be down below for you, and until next time, thank you very much for watching, and a big thanks as well to my patrons who allow me to continue making videos.